Today, let's talk about mud tires versus all-terrain tires. Stay tuned, guys. That is right, everybody. I wanted to take a moment and talk about my Milestar Patagonia MT-02 mud terrain tires versus an all-terrain tire. And the reason I wanted to take this time to do that is for two reasons. One, I've been running these for the past about 6 months on the Jeep, and before that I ran an all-terrain. I ran the KO2s from BF Goodrich, and I thought it would, after wheeling it for 6 months and being able to test them out in both mud, snow, and on slick rock, I wanted to, what better way to do this? Now, if you are new to the channel, welcome. If you have been watching the channel for a while, you will know that I just finished an adventure. You had seen it last week. And out here, I put those mud terrains to the test in all sorts of different snow and mud. And honestly, they held up really, really well. And I was very happy with them. And honestly, there are a lot of people out there, and I know there are tons of other people that have done videos on this, but there are a lot of people out there that are always kind of hesitant between going from an all-terrain to a mud terrain or a mud terrain to an all-terrain. So I wanted to discuss just a little bit of the differences and my thoughts on the switch, because I used to have all-terrains and now I run mud terrains. So let's have that discussion. Okay, so let's talk about my mud terrains really quickly. These are, as I said before, a Milestar Patagonia MT-02, and these are actually a 35-inch tall tire. And the reason I went with the 35-inch tall tire, because as you guys know, on a stock Jeep Rubicon, you get 33-inch tires, typically wrapped in either a KO2 or some kind of all-terrain. Well, I ran those for several years, and they worked really, really well. And when it was time to switch tires, I decided to give these a try, because from a lot of different people that I watch on YouTube and from other reviews that I've had, people have been loving these tires, and I wanted to see kind of what all the fuss was about. And then I wrapped those tires onto a Method 706 bead grip wheel. So let's talk about the difference between the mud terrain and an all-terrain for just a second. So a mud terrain generally is wider. And here in a second I'll show you the front of the tire. It is generally wider than an all-terrain, and it has a much thicker lug pattern. The lugs on the tire are way thicker. The sidewalls are generally a little bit stronger, and the pattern on the tire itself, which I'll show you all this here in a second, is a lot more spread out. Where on an all-terrain it looks more compact together, and the lugs are a lot smaller and not as thick. These are completely opposite. They are much thicker, and the reason is it is a mud terrain. It is designed to grab hold of the mud, try and find as much traction as it can, and having that wider pattern, one, just the tire size, but having, much more space between the lugs allows you to push that mud and that dirt or snow or whatever it is up out of the way. And that's one of the great things about a mud terrain, is that in the snow they work really, really well. So my whole adventure that I just finished, I ran them at 20 psi. And it actually turned out to be a really good test, because when I had the stock wheels and tires, which were all terrains on the Jeep, I always ran them as the lowest was ever 20 psi, because I never wanted to have that accidental bead come off, the tire slip off the bead. I didn't want that. So running it at this pressure was a really good test, because I got to experience these tires at 20 psi versus other tires in the snow and mud. And let me tell you, they worked really, really, really well. Okay, so here is the tread pattern of the Milestar Patagonia MT-02s. As you guys can tell, there's a lot more space here between the lugs. They're still close together, but there's way more space here for the mud to go through, and the lugs are way thicker. On an all-terrain, this pattern wouldn't look like this. It would be much closer together, and the grooves would be way skinnier, because the purpose of the all-terrain is to be an all-purpose kind of tire, so you can travel through all terrains, snow, mud, whatnot, and it should do relatively well at getting you through that, especially if you were to air them down and get that bigger footprint, which we'll talk about that here in a second. But you air them down, they're supposed to get you through everything, where a mud terrain is supposed to be a little more specific to just a lot harsher terrain that you're trying to traverse through. Now, in the overland world today and off-road community, mud terrains have become kind of the gold standard for a lot of things. Now, there are a lot of people that love all terrains, a lot of people that love mud terrains. I honestly love both. I had no issues with my all terrains when I had them, and I really wanted to test out having a mud terrain to see if I would like it just as much, and I really, really do. The other thing you'll notice is the tire width. This tire is much wider than a typical all-terrain. My all-terrains that I had on the Jeep, though they were 33, so they were a smaller size, they weren't quite as wide. They probably take off about maybe two inches off of the tire width. So as I was going through, different types of stuff, I didn't have quite as big of a footprint. Okay, I know my head's probably cut off, which is fine. That's not the purpose of what I'm trying to show you. I'm trying to show you guys, this right here is the pattern, the footprint of my mud terrain aired down at 20 psi. And as you can tell, this pattern is much wider. On an all-terrain, you could take out probably about that much, which is probably around that 2 inches like I just said. This line here would be your mud terrain. I hope you guys can see it. This would be your all-terrain. The pattern would be much smaller, meaning that your footprint over top of the surface that you're trying to go over isn't going to be as wide. And having a wider footprint means that you have a better chance at having more traction on it, and two, you can actually float across the top of it way easier. Because when you are in snow or in mud, the wider your footprint, the more it pushes out everything so that the tire doesn't just sink in. And that's why you air down your tires, where if you were to not, you have a greater chance of sinking into the mud or the snow, and you have a harder time getting through it. Now, this goes true with both a mud terrain and an all-terrain tire. That's a real pretty view in the background. That's actually Pikes Peak, guys. You'll have seen that view in other videos of mine, and today I've been looking at it all day, and right now it is definitely golden hour. But I'm going to turn us just a little bit here so that one, y'all can see my face, and two, we kind of keep the tires, because that is the spec of this video. I just couldn't take squatting and bending down on the ground anymore, guys. I'm getting better, but I still can't hold it for a long period of time. But that's okay. So let's go back to our talk about footprint. Now, like I said, if you don't air down your tires, you have a greater chance of sinking into that terrain. And as you guys will have seen from my previous video, and you'll see the footage here in a second, as I was going over the snow, having that wider footprint means I was floating across the snow. There was one point where I got out to film, I set up the camera, and I drove past, going up this hill. When I got to the top, I stepped out of the Jeep, and the snow was super, super deep. It was about a foot deep of snow in the sense of when I stepped out of the Jeep versus where the tires were. But when I stepped into the tire print of my Jeep, my foot sunk another about 4 inches into the snow the whole way down. So my tire footprint was so great that I was able to just kind of go over the top of that snow without sinking all the way down the entire, because I had sunk down about a foot, sunk down that extra 4 inches. That's quite big, guys. And to me, that was really cool to see that, because it just showed me the whole, proof behind airing down your tires. Not only that, but also airing down your tires makes for a much more comfortable ride, because you don't want to go over corrugations with your tires not aired down. You have a higher chance of breaking something, rattling something loose, and just being straight up uncomfortable, guys. It is not comfortable whatsoever. But airing down your tires does make a difference. Now, let's talk, what should you air them down to? When I ran in all-terrain, I have to be honest, I didn't have my Method bead grip wheels. I had my plain Jane stock Rubicon rims, and so I never aired them down lower than 20 psi. If I had to go lower, it was because I got stuck somewhere in the snow or in a situation and I needed that extra bit of traction to try and get it out. So I had taken it lower, but I don't go much lower than 20 psi on a stock rim. if I had this bead grip, I would have taken my all-terrain down way below that into 15, even the single digits. Because an all-terrain can be compressed down really far for a footprint, and you're not really going to damage the tire at all. The same goes for a mud terrain. They're literally interchangeable, guys. A mud terrain, you can drop that tire pressure way down and be just fine. You're not going to damage the tire as long as you're not driving it on pavement, things like that. But off-road, it'll be fine. Now on here, I have dropped these down to about 5 psi before. And the reason was I got into an area, it was super, super muddy, and I just kind of got myself stuck. And I didn't want to futz with the traction boards when there was no tree to anchor to pull myself out. So literally I just got out, dropped the PSI down to 5, and I had enough traction and a bigger footprint to just crawl myself out of the mud. So you can drop them really far down. Now, I do suggest that if you are not running either a bead lock or a bead grip wheel, just be cautious. A standard wheel, I wouldn't go lower than about 20 psi unless you truly had to, because the chance of running the tire off the bead is way greater, and you do not want that to happen. Where if you have a bead grip wheel or a bead lock, especially a bead lock, you can drop that thing if you wanted to 0, and it's not gonna come off. Now I know with these bead grips, I have seen other people and other channels, especially a good, shout out to Nate at Dirt Lifestyle. He has dropped his wheels to 0 psi on bead grip wheels and never lost it off the bead. So I feel really comfortable when I have to drop this way into the single digits that I'm not going to slip the bead. And that's, just comfort to me more than anything. So throughout this, I've kind of given you my opinion. I do love all terrains. I think they work really, really well, and I do love mud terrains. They have been awesome. Now they do both have their pros and cons. Con of an all terrain, in my own opinion, is you just don't get as wide of a footprint, if you will, and it becomes a little bit harder in snow because the snow and mud likes to get stuck within the lugs of the tire and in those little grooves, and it doesn't just flick out as easily. Or with a mud terrain, the mud and snow it gets stuck in there and it flips right out as you're going, and it doesn't really stay. As you guys saw my track pattern, there's nothing stuck in it, which is awesome. The upside of an all-terrain is they do tend to last longer. They will last way longer than a mud terrain will when it comes to mileage, just because the way they wear and the lugs are a lot smaller and they wear way better versus this. Now, with my mud terrains, upside, I get more traction, things don't stick to them, I love them. With these, you can get all sorts of sizes in both, but with these, they've been working great. And to be fair, Milestar's new formula they have with these tires have been wearing fantastically. Like, they haven't worn unevenly, there's not issues with them, nothing's happened to them. They wear really, really well, and they're super, super tough. The one thing I did notice with my all-terrains was when I was in Moab, I could hit certain rocks and crawl over them, or if one side was getting more pressure than the other, some of the lugs broke off. Now whether that's just wear and tear because those tires were quite old, or if it just was the tire just wasn't strong enough, I don't know, but they did break down. These have not broken down over anything I have shoved them on, which is awesome. The downside of this mud terrain, it is heavier. This tire, not just because it's a 35, which is heavier, this mud terrain, because it's got thicker lugs, is heavier than my all-terrain, which means the Jeep does work harder to turn these tires when I am on, which kind of knocks down the fuel economy of the Jeep. It doesn't get great fuel economy anyways, it's a brick, but I have dropped down to where I can get I used to get about 20 on the highway. I'm now getting about 16, 17 on a good day. If I hit a headwind, you can forget it. It didn't matter whether I had these or all-terrains. You hit a headwind, it's gone. It's nowhere to be seen. But they are heavier. The other thing is, like I said, they do wear down faster. These tires will wear out faster than my all-terrains. I had my all-terrains for about 34,000 miles, guys. This is just between it. I think it was about 33,500. Lasted me about 3 years. It was great. These, I don't see myself getting another 30,000 miles out of these. I will be happy if I get about 20,000, because it's a thicker lug. On the road, they do wear out way faster because that lug just gets, torn up by the road. It just gets eaten away, and so it'll wear out way further. And if I get 20,000 miles out of these, I will be happy. Now, which do I prefer? Well, if I had to choose between the two, and I am going to choose, I'm not going to sit here and say, well, I like both of them. I do like both of them. They both have pros and cons. They both worked extremely well. But if I had to choose, I would choose a mud terrain. I love, one, the way it looks. It looks really aggressive, and it's awesome. It just makes the Jeep look more aggressive. Two, I love having my wider footprint on the ground, and the fact that when I'm going over mud and snow, it is not getting clogged up in the tires, making it harder or slicker for the tire to get through. And also when I'm in Moab and rock crawling, these grab hold and they really don't let go. They don't. I absolutely love the fact they don't let go. I absolutely love these. And also, I don't know, I've just really grown to enjoy having it. My Jeep is used for adventuring. It's not a mall crawler, though it has kind of been over the past 5 months of recovery. But it's not a mall crawler. It's designed for adventuring. And so far with these tires, guys, I've had no issue. I've never had a puncture. I've never had anything happen to these tires so far. And I am very happy with them. So if you had to ask me, all-terrain or mud terrain, I would choose a mud terrain. It just, for everything I do, I absolutely love the way they work. Now, does that mean I wouldn't go back to an all-terrain? I definitely will. Probably in the future. Will it be the next set of tires? I don't know yet. But there are different tires out there that do different things. And sometimes, if I was going to use this for touring, if you will, I would probably go back to an all-terrain. Just because it wouldn't be as hard on the engine to turn, and two, it wouldn't wear out as much. Trying the tour in this thing, going to all over the country, it'll do it. It'll be great. But I do keep in the back of my mind that the tires are going to wear out much quicker doing that. But at the moment, I'm okay with that because I am testing them. And I will let you guys know how these things continue to hold up, as I have been doing throughout the course of this year, because we have so many things going on. It is going to be awesome, and they're going to be put to the test, just like this entire Jeep will be. So thank you all for joining me today. I hope you guys found this informational. I really enjoyed, providing it to you guys. If I left something out, let me know in the comments. I'm still learning as I go too, guys. These are still all, knowledge is all new, and I never stop learning. So you're never really truly the expert all the way. But thank you guys for joining me. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't, guys. I'm trying to grow the channel, and you guys are what makes that happen. Also, a link in the description to my other social media accounts, and a list of parts with links to them of what I use on this rig behind me are in the description below. But thank you all for joining me again. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you all next time out on the trail.